Cat? Where was I? All right, if you would like to be a member, or if you are a member and would like to have a commitment here at this meeting, please see Brent, our commitment chair, after the meeting. Remember to please be polite, keep your phones off, and stay seated during our speaker. Oh, I gotta find my paper. He has such a long title that I can't remember it off the top of my head. Now help me enthusiastically, and I mean enthusiastically, welcome our cherished and humble founding member, Mike Bennett.
Hello, my name is Mike Bennett, and I'm an alcoholic. A week or two ago, somebody said something nice to me after the stag meeting, and somebody next to him said, "Don't say anything nice about him. His head's going to get so big he won't fit through the door." And I said, "Listen, my ego is at maximum capacity. There's no danger of it getting any worse. We're fine." Thank you all for coming out. Sarah, happy birthday. What a big deal. Thank you for giving me the honor of presenting you with your chip. Very nice. And I'd like to welcome all of my old friends that some of them I have not seen for a while. And my granddaughter is here, Briley. And she likes attention like her granddaddy. She doesn't mind me calling her out. She is not a member of AA yet. She did get suspended from school a couple years ago, though, for smuggling vodka in a water bottle. So I think there's hope for her. Her mother and dad sentenced her to grandpa for a while. So she came to some open speaker meetings with me just to kind of see what we're like. And funny thing is, she fell in love with a bunch of the people and made some good friends here. So she loves coming to hear her old granddaddy talk when I do. And anyway, we have a little bigger crowd than normal because I invited some of the people who normally. It's funny because a lot of the people in this room have sat in my office and talked with me or called me on the phone and talked with me at length about things going on in their lives. The difference here is they don't expect to get a turn to talk. It's almost like having them in my office, but it's captive. They can't say anything when I have the microphone because I'm the only one with the microphone. So I invited them to come so I could force my opinion on them, which I always enjoy doing. And but anyways, what a great crowd. There's some people in the room that I've sponsored for decades and people that I've sponsored for a very short period of time. And I'll tell you, so much of my sobriety, I gave my credit to my sponsor for me surviving. And in the early years, it was so true because I don't think I would have survived without my sponsor. But after so many years, it's almost like the role changes. And when you start sponsoring people, they're the people who really save your life and who really keep you accountable. And, oh, there you are, Anna. I was wondering where you were because you weren't sitting with him. Well, welcome. Nice to see you. Is he in trouble? So, Brent, what did you do? Why is your wife not sitting with you? Anyways, none of my business. But anyways, and I share this with people quite often. When you talk with people every day, or different people every day, but you talk to people every day about the emotional problems that they have in their lives, it's hard to leave your day and go home and behave badly when you've been talking with people throughout the day about the correct behavior and about doing the right thing, no matter how it makes you look, no matter how it makes you feel, just do the right thing. It's hard to have those conversations over and over and over and then go home and be mean to your wife or your kids or your dog. So the people I sponsor have been a much bigger help to me in the later years of my sobriety than my sponsor ever has been. And I say that sincerely because my sponsor didn't think enough of me to show up tonight. He went to the meeting with those guys, we're in a group, but he was gonna show up, but he made a deal with me. He said, "I'll show up Wednesday to hear your talk if you show up Saturday to hear mine." So he was speaking last Saturday. Well, I was busy doing stuff and I forgot. And I remembered Sunday morning, and I thought, oh, shit. But it was too late because it was like 14 hours after he gave his talk. So when I got to the stag meeting and I saw him, I said, Hugh, I'm really sorry I missed your talk last night, but the truth is several people told me you gave a terrible talk anyway, so I'm really kind of glad I didn't. And he said, which I thought was funny, he said, who? He wanted to know who you were. And I said, well, I was just making it up. He said, and it's too bad because I had this whole thing planned because about 5 of the, Hugh's saying this, he said about 5 of the other people I sponsor were sitting on this side of the room, so I was going to make you sit on that side. So when I started my talk, I could say, I'm glad to see my favorite sponsees are here so I could turn my back to you and face them. And I wasn't going to get, I was happy I didn't give him satisfaction because I thought it was funny. He has a good sense of humor. He's a good sponsor too. He's been a really good sponsor to me. As I was saying earlier, the role kind of changes in sponsorship after a while of what is the more important thing, I think, in our lives. When somebody is brand new, it seems to me that our job as sponsors is to help get them through the steps. And I don't mean through the steps in so much as that you complete them, because the steps are really a journey that we begin. So we get people on that journey, and once they're up to the point where they're starting to hand their number out and try to force their opinion on some newcomer, then the role of a sponsor, I think, really begins to shift a little bit. And then instead of it being directing somebody in what they should do, getting them through the steps, is more about helping them stay accountable and helping them when they lose perspective of reality, because that's really the key, I think, with us, is that it is so easy for us to lose perspective of reality because we're so emotionally involved with our own lives and with our own decisions that we have to make. And it's hard to see how simple the problem and the solution is when you're caught up in it emotionally. And so having a sponsor that understands that, where you can call them and say, hey, something's not going right and I don't know what to do, and well, if you deliver that message to somebody not emotionally involved, it's easy for them to see the truth. Some people say, well, I can't tell you what to do with your life. I can barely tell you what to do with mine. Well, I can tell you what to do with your life. It's very simple most of the time, very obvious if you're not emotionally caught up in it. Chuck Chamberlain, and if you're new and you never heard of Chuck C., he's worth Googling on YouTube and listening to him talk, because I think he was one of the most wonderful AA examples that ever existed. And I listened to Chuck so many times I could almost tell a story. I think, and I've said often, that I have probably learned more from Chuck C. after he died than everybody else I know combined in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've had some of the greatest sponsors in the world, but Chuck C. had a perspective on life and on reality that was unmatched, I think. And he was Clancy's sponsor, for some of you who might know who Clancy is. And if you're new and you don't know either one of those names, look both of them up and listen to them, because there's wonderful speakers, wonderful AA people, and they're the ones who helped me learn what I've learned. Those people and people like you have helped me learn the things I've learned about AA. Today, well, not today specifically, but this month, January, is the founding month of our group, the Rarely Group. It was founded in 1992, so this month we celebrate 33 years, our group. So I think that is worth some applause. Ken Henderson started this group then. He was a very close friend of Oscar's, which many of you know Oscar. They grew up together in the Pacific Group in Los Angeles, and Ken retired and moved to Prescott, and he started this meeting. And kind of a little bit off the format of the Pacific Group, and it ran very well and very strongly here for a long time. There are many people in this room that were long-term members of the Rarely Group way back in the day, and I moved away in 2005. I was very active and involved with the group until then. I moved away in 2005 for work. I went to Alabama, and I was a missionary for the Rarely Group in the South. And that's okay to laugh at that. It's funny. I was a good missionary too. I was very active. Anyways, I spread the message of, the way we do AA here. They didn't want to hear it, interestingly enough. They liked AA the way they did it, but I did my best. And it's funny when you travel and you go to meetings in different places. I don't know how many of you have moved in your sobriety, but I've moved several times in my sobriety, and it's different all over the country. In the South, one thing I found interesting is when the meeting starts, they read how it works. they read the 12 traditions, they read the promises, they read more about alcoholism, they read a vision for you, and probably 2 or 3 other things, and then they start the meeting. So by the time the meeting starts, I'm not even exaggerating, by the time the meeting starts, 30 minutes or more has passed, and then you have like this little bit of time for people to share, and then everybody's pissed off because people are talking too long because there ain't enough time to share. And I know it just seemed obvious to me coming from here, but if you read a little bit less, there'd probably be more time for people to share. But I always thought that was different, irritating in the beginning, but after a while you get used to anything. And but you go to different parts of the country, and they have all kinds of different goofy little traditions that they have. Oscar and I were talking at dinner tonight about people chanting during the readings. And you know, that's not something that is a AA thing. How many of you didn't know that? Yeah, like, what are the chants we just read? What was one of them? What was it? Principles before personalities. Clancy used to tell a story that there was some guy in Los Angeles that didn't like him. So when they would read that, he would say, principles before personalities, and look right at Clancy and point at him, you know. So newcomers that just got out of treatment, they'd hear that and think that was something they were supposed to do, so they started doing that. And then more people started doing it. Next thing you know, everybody thinks it's something that AAs do, but that's not something that AAs do at all. The sing-alongs in AA are just this weird thing that's kind of evolved over the years. I don't think you can stop it. It's so widespread now, it just is what it is. So I just think it's entertaining to listen to. I don't participate in it myself, but I think it's entertaining to listen to because I know kind of the origin of it. But the Rarely Group was the same way. There were many things back in the beginning of the Rarely Group that we didn't do, and now as the Rarely Group has changed hands and secretaries and people dying and different people moving, stuff has evolved. So there's some things in our group that weren't really part of its original tradition, but there are also some things in the Rarely Group that have become very, very wonderful new traditions in our group that I'm very happy to have, and it warms my heart when I see them. Those of you who are new, you don't know any different. So, but anyways, welcome to our group, and I'm glad that you're participating tonight and helping us celebrate 33 years of being a group, because that's a long time. I think the only other group in this town that has been in existence as long as this is the Prescott group, if it's still going. Is it, John? It is. So the Prescott group was going on before the Rotary Group, and Men's Stag, believe it or not, was going on before this. I don't know if Girly Birds was it, Diana? Shh, Jesus. You know, I don't like that group. I don't like that group at all. I've been trying to get an invitation to attend that group for decades, and not once have I ever been invited to come, even like as a guest speaker. You know, sometimes it wouldn't have to be an open meeting to have a guest speaker, I wouldn't suppose, but nobody's ever invited me. So, but I think the Girly Birds was around for quite a while, so it's likely, 95, good. I'm glad you're not as old as us. I teased Diana because her and I got sober the same year in 1992. But I have 4.5 months more sobriety than her, and I never let her forget it. But every time I point it out, she says to me, well, did you ever speak at the Women's International Convention? And the answer is no, I cannot even get an invitation to Girly Birds, for Christ's sake. Anyways, but she did. So she's a big shot speaker, travels around the world. But anyway, so the topic for tonight's discussion is recovery from alcoholism. Bill Wilson, the original founding member of Alcoholics Anonymous, he was a very disturbed alcoholic like me and many of you, and he struggled trying to get sober for years and years and years at the detriment of his family and his career and everything, and he finally gave up. And one day he was standing in a hospital at his wit's end, and the doctor was talking to his wife. The doctor in charge of his care was talking to his wife, and they didn't know that he could hear them. But she said, "Doctor, is there any hope for my husband?" And the doctor said, "No. He will have to be locked up for life, or he will surely drink himself insane or die." And that was the day, if you've read the big book, that was the day that Bill Wilson finally reached that point of such hopelessness that he reached a level of surrender that was unmatched in his life. And that surrender gave him the ability to release the obsession to drink. And Bill Wilson never had a drink after that day. Didn't mean life was easy for him. Life was still struggle. AA didn't exist, so nobody knew what to do with people like us. And in 4,000 years of recorded history, there's always been alcoholism. It's not new to Alcoholics Anonymous. It's been going on from the beginning of time when they first started crushing grapes. But nobody ever had a solution. One time, 100 years before Alcoholics Anonymous, the Washingtonian movement thought they had a solution for recovery from alcoholism, and they had within a year they had 100, or within 5 years they had 100,000 sober members. 100,000 sober members. Do you know how many people we had at the end of 5 years? Maybe like 300, and they had 100,000 people. But 5 years later they were extinct, and they were so extinct that when AA came about, Bill Wilson had never even heard of them. That's how extinct they had become. And the reason that was is because they didn't have any of the traditions that we have. That's really where our traditions came from, is their downfall. Bill Wilson learned about them, and he started doing some research, and that brought on the traditions that has kept us going now for 90 years. And but you think now we are millions and millions of people worldwide. We're in every country in the world. I imagine there's little countries that few of us have ever even heard about, that there might be a little AA meeting somewhere or something. The funny thing about that is I was sitting on my porch one day. I had quit drinking so many times I couldn't even tell you how many times I'd quit drinking. And I quit drinking forever. I never was going to drink again because I could see the devastation that I was causing in my family and my life. But I could only stay sober so long before I would reach a point of such hopelessness in sobriety that I would have to drink again. Only alcoholics know the feeling of being sober too long. You can only stay sober so long before it becomes so unbearable that life is not worth living. And as long as you think, like I did, that maybe a drink would make it better, we're always going to drink again. It's very rare that an alcoholic suicide happens to somebody who is drinking. It's almost always the person who has been sober too long, and they're not willing to drink again, and those are the alcoholic suicides. The ones who are drunk, generally, I would think, are the ones who misgauged it just a little. You know, they made the phone call. Hello, this is Mike Bennett. I am killing myself at 974 West 5th Street. Please don't come and help me. And you know, those are the type of suicide attempts that happen with people who are actively drinking. And if they time it right, somebody gets there in time. Every once in a while, they took a few too many pills and waited a little bit too long to make the phone call, and they might find them dead, but very, very rare. Generally, it's the person who's been sober too long, and they never make a phone call, and they don't leave a note. They just find them dead, because life becomes so unbearable we can't stand it. And I feel so lucky that I was still willing to drink when those times came to me, because I would quit drinking because I could not stand what I was doing to everybody in my life, including me. I couldn't stand it anymore, and I would stop drinking one more time forever. And then I would be sober. And in the beginning, when I first get sober, I would always feel better, because you'd start sleeping after a little bit, you'd start eating, you'd start taking a bath again and feeling like a normal person. So it'd get better in the beginning. But after a few weeks, then a little bit of irritability would set in, and a little bit of discomfort. And the next thing you know, you're slamming a door or snapping at somebody, and the next thing you know, rage is starting to happen if you're like me. And then before long, it's just complete and utter chaos in my life, sober. And the worst part is the confusion. I had no idea what was causing it, because I knew people told me drinking was my problem. So if I stopped drinking, my life would get better. So I'd stop drinking, my life would get better a little bit in the beginning, but after a while it would get worse. So I was completely confused, because I didn't understand how, if drinking's a problem, how come stopping drinking doesn't solve the problem? How come I get worse every time I stop drinking? Well, eventually I quit trying to figure it out, and I'd just drink again. And after a few drinks, the pressure would be off, and I'd feel better, and I'd feel like maybe there'd be hope. And I would drink, and I'd try to control it. I'd tell myself, this time it'll be different. This time I'm just going to have 2 shots and 2 beers, and that's it. And the only thing that changed is my glasses kept getting bigger. Tea glass, go from a shot glass to a tea glass, and you still count 1, 2. But after a while, it wouldn't relieve the pressure. I'd drink and drink and drink, and the pressure wouldn't get relieved. So it finally came to the point that Bill Wilson found himself, I think, with that overhearing that doctor, that his case was completely hopeless, and he wasn't willing to drink anymore, and he didn't know how he could stay sober. And that happened with me one day. I finally drank so much. I was in a business that I had been selling stolen merchandise out of for some time, and I didn't even open the doors that day. I just showed up for work, and I started drinking, and I was just working around inside, and I kept drinking, and about 4 o'clock that afternoon, I was as drunk as I'd ever been in my life, physically, but my mind was as clear as a bell. I knew exactly that I was at that point that alcohol was not going to work for me anymore. And I remember saying to myself, this is over. I just can't do this anymore. It's not worth it. I didn't know what I was going to do about it, but I knew it was over. And I thought to myself, wouldn't this just be my luck? I finally have quit drinking, and I really believed I had, and I have not had a drink since that time. But I finally quit drinking, and I'm so drunk, I'm probably going to get stopped on the way home and go to jail on the day I've quit drinking. And I thought, what irony, you know? So I went to the convenience store, and I got a big cup of coffee, and I drove home with my head out the window and one eye closed, you know? So all the lines had come together, and I could try to make it home. And I somehow made it home, and I remember sitting there the next day trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. I was smoking and sitting on the porch, and I'd heard Alcoholics Anonymous, but I didn't know anything about it. The only 2 examples I had, one of them was dead and one of them was still drinking, so you guys had not set a good example for me in those 2 people. But I didn't know what else to do, so I looked up Alcoholics Anonymous in the Yellow Pages, and I called anyways because I couldn't come up with a better answer. And a lady at Intergroup, which I'm glad you guys are at the Intergroup meeting tonight because Intergroup's very valuable, somebody answered the phone at Intergroup, and I said, I'd like to go to an AA meeting. And she said, well, there's one tonight at 7 o'clock, and gave me the address. And I remember, and I had been sober. I had been sober for a little while, and then I got drunk that day, and then I got sober. You know, that was the only day I drank there. After a few months, I drank that one day. And I remember turning around from hanging the phone up on the wall, because before cell phones, I hung the phone up on. I turned around, and my wife at that time was looking at me, and she said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm going to go to an AA meeting. She said, why? And she didn't have any idea why I would consider going to AA, because I had been sober for some time, and then I'd just gotten drunk that one day. And I said, hell, I don't know. I wanted to say, shut up, you know, but you can't talk to people like that when they're, you know, when you've been in that much trouble. So I said, hell, I don't know. And the truth was, I didn't have any idea. I was completely baffled by what was going on in my life. I hadn't, and if you know somebody who's a drunk that can't seem to quit drinking, and if you're one of those drunks like me and you can't seem to quit drinking and you don't know why, I understand how you feel. I had no idea what was wrong with me. People told me quit drinking, my life would get better, and I tried it and they were wrong. And I knew right up until the time my sponsor helped me understand what AA was and alcoholism was. I knew right up until that time, and I still know today, that they were wrong. Drinking was never my problem. Drinking was my solution. Being sober was my problem. When I was sober, I could not handle my life emotionally. I was absolutely as emotionally unstable as anybody I knew, to the point that I thought there was something wrong with me mentally. I thought maybe I was mentally insane secretly. I didn't want anybody else to know that. My mother and dad were both mentally ill, and I was so terrified that that's what really was wrong with me, that when I found out I was just an alcoholic, I was relieved. I thought that was the greatest news in the world, that I was just an alcoholic. And I still believe that to this day, that the only thing that's ever been wrong with me is I suffer from alcoholism, or I'm blessed with alcoholism, depending on how you look at it. But anyways, so I went to AA with no idea what was wrong with me, and hoping I was an alcoholic. And when I was sitting in a meeting, an old timer said, he was sober about 20 years, and he said, if your problem's drinking, stop drinking, your life should get better. But if you stop drinking and your life gets worse, maybe we can help you. And that was the first time I thought, maybe somebody knows how I feel. And he appointed himself my sponsor that night, and he started trying to help me understand what alcoholism was. Bill Wilson, later in years, after he was about 12, 13 years sober, and he turned AA over to Alcoholics Anonymous, and he was kind of becoming a member of AA again. And on a side note, I want to say this. Bill Wilson had this history of depression, long-term depression. He went through one depression that was about 12 years long, a steady depression. Now, I've read a lot of history on AA, and I've studied a lot of the different things that Bill wrote. And one of the conclusions I've come to, this is just my opinion. I don't give a shit if you agree with it or not. It's just my opinion. But it's based on a lot of historical research, reading everything I could possibly put my hand on. Bill Wilson, in the very beginning, he understood that once he got sober and he started working with new people, it gave him a feeling of purpose that nothing else in his life had ever given him, that feeling of purpose from working with a new man. Well, then he got so busy trying to protect the thing he had discovered, putting all these books together, putting the traditions together, trying to get it all in place so he could hand it to AA so AA could have some security and some lasting protection. That during all of those years, Bill Wilson, there's very little evidence that Bill Wilson was actively working with a lot of new people during those long years of his depression. And the funny thing is, the timing is once he turned it all over back to AA and he had nothing to do, and he was sitting around in his office in New York, twiddling his thumbs because they didn't want him helping anymore. Somebody came in and wanted to talk to somebody, and they said, "Hey, Bill, you're not doing anything. You mind talking to this new guy?" And Bill started talking to new people again and started working with new people. And Bill didn't write much about depression after that. I think he got actively involved working with new people again, and it snapped him out of it, and he stayed fine the rest of his life. He didn't quit writing about AA, but he started writing about something different. He started writing about emotional sobriety, and that's really the only thing you could find from those years on about his writings were about emotional sobriety. And I am convinced, absolutely, without a doubt, that from the very moment that I stopped drinking, the only thing I've ever struggled with is emotional sobriety. That's it. That's why drinking was not my problem. That's why drinking was my solution. What AA sponsorship and AA's steps and meetings and all of the things that we do here, what they've done for me is they've helped me deal with emotional sobriety. I call it emotional stability. I think now, if Bill Wilson was here, and him and I were to sit down and talk about the first two steps. And if I was to say, "Bill, why didn't you write the first step the way you meant it? Why didn't you write it that we were powerless over alcohol and our emotions had become unmanageable?" I believe Bill Wilson would say, "You know what, kid, I think you're right." But Bill wasn't sober long enough to know that when he was new, when he wrote those steps. He's only sober 3 years. He didn't know enough to know what he learned later in life. It was very inspired, the big book and the steps. But I think he would agree with me. And in step 2, came to believe that some power greater than ourselves could restore us to emotional stability. Because I think that's the only thing that I or you have ever been looking for, is just emotional stability. Imagine how good life would be if we could just face life with emotional stability. If everything made sense. Oscar asked at dinner tonight, we were having fun, he decided to play this game, and he said, if you had one wish to get whatever you wanted out of life, what would it be? And I said, well, I would like to have the ability to not overreact without taking a few minutes to think about stuff. Because, sometimes you get faced with a new idea and you just overreact and make an ass out of yourself. And none of us like looking bad, so I'd like to be. So Oscar said, "You mean the ability to pause?" And I said, yeah, that'd be nice. And sometimes I can do that. I do it far better than I ever have in the past. But some days I still just, if I'm tired or if I'm hungry or angry, lonely, something, I'll just overreact instantly, and then I got to go back and clean up the mess I made. But wouldn't it be nice if no matter what happened in life, I had enough emotional stability that I could pause for just a second and see it, step back emotionally and look at it for what it really is and then react to it, how much nicer my life would be. That's all the steps are about. That's all sponsorship's about. It's all the meetings and everything we go about, listening to speakers. It's just us trying to find emotional stability. That's it. And that's all I talk with people about every single day. When I answer the phone or somebody comes and sits in my office, all we talk about is trying to find a way to have some emotional stability. And it's always in relationships. Isn't that funny? We're always dealing with the relationship problem, it seems to me. Sometimes it's with a better half, or it's with a boss, or it's with a peer, or somebody we work with, or some boob in AA who doesn't understand how sensitive I am. But it's always about relationships. And if I could learn to separate myself emotionally from what's going on in my life would be so much easier. But because of our sensitive nature, we get caught up in it emotionally because we don't want to look bad. So we make decisions based on how things make us look that always lead to bad decisions for us. At least that's been my experience for me. Now, it's gotten much better over the years. But people like you who have meetings like this have helped me learn the things that I need to learn to grow. And I think that's all a spiritual path is. And say, help me learn to grow on a spiritual path. But I think all a spiritual path is trying to find a way to interact with others in a kind way, in a loving way. I used to be a guy who early on, I always claimed that I was an atheist, that I didn't believe in God. I never went to church growing up. I grew up in South Phoenix down on Van Buren Street and moved up to this part of the country when I was a teenager. And while I was down there, my mother and dad, they were unstable. They couldn't function in society. So every time we turned around, we were in foster care of some sort. And then some months later, they'd get their act together and come get us back, which in the beginning was a very happy feeling to be in a foster home or a facility and have your mother and dad show up to reclaim you. It was a good feeling in the beginning. But then after I got a little bit older, every time we went home, it was such chaos and violence and craziness that when I saw them coming, I didn't want to see them. I just wanted to stay where I was. I didn't want to go back with them. And that's the way my life was constantly growing up. And when I got up here, I was put into permanent foster care with a man who was an atheist, but he was a good man. He was one of the best men I ever knew. He was a military man, retired airborne ranger, and he just didn't believe there was a God, but he believed in being kind to people, and he raised me in a kind fashion and taught me to be fair. I didn't always do it, but he set the example for me. And so I just thought, well, he's a good man, and if he's an atheist, there's no reason I can't be an atheist. I didn't really make a conscious choice out of anything other than wanting to be like him. So I came into AA telling people I was atheist, and I think I kind of believed it at some level, but I think deep down I knew it wasn't true. And when I heard people in AA talking about agnostics, and they explained what it was, I immediately identified with that. I knew that's what I really was an agnostic. I was just confused because I didn't know anything about it. And so when I started taking the steps with my sponsor, I remember I did my fifth step in the front seat of a psychedelic Pinto station wagon. Some of you get to do your fifth steps with psychiatrists and, professionals in treatment centers, but I did it with a guy in a Pinto station wagon, and I told him the truth about some stuff I'd been keeping secret to myself. And after I was done with this whole fifth step session with him, I remember I was driving home, and I had about a 45-minute drive home, and about 10 minutes into the drive, I had a feeling come over me that I had never experienced before. And I said for years and years that it was this massive spiritual experience, which in a way it was. But really what it was for the first time in my life ever, I felt good about something I had done. I felt good about who I was, something I was doing with my life. And I had never experienced that feeling before. I didn't know that at that time, but looking back on it, I'd never experienced feeling good about me. And I felt so good about me that the thought occurred to me, what if you guys are right? What if there is a God that loves me? Now, from that moment to this moment, over 3 decades later, I have not spent much time or much effort doing anything else except pursuing that. I want that feeling more. and I want it more, and I want it more, and I want it more. Well, how do you get it? How do you find that feeling? There are some people in this world who can be alone, and they can isolate themselves and not really contribute to society and to helping others and being chill, and they seem to be happy. I know some of those people. I'm sure all of you know some people like that. I tried to be a person like that, but the more I tried to be a person like that was isolated and tried to find a relationship with God, the worse I got. And the worse I got, the worse I got. And the worse I got, the worse I got. When I would re-engage and do the things you guys taught me about being involved with people, the more it seems to me that I'm involved with people, the closer I experience God in my life. And I have come to believe that for somebody like me, and maybe you, that I have to let you in to let God in. So I try to remember that now when I start feeling off a little bit. It's funny because lately I have been thinking a lot about people with substantial time in AA who are unhappy. And all of us know those people, and many of us have been those people. But when somebody has years to decades of sobriety and they are unhappy in their life, I can almost guarantee you they are not active in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because when I step back from AA and I get to watching television and I get to doing things with my kids, not that that's not important, the kids part, the television we could do that, but there's got to be some balance in life. But when I step back out of my activity in Alcoholics Anonymous and I spend too much time in isolation, when I step back from AA, I get worse emotionally. But when I start getting back involved and I start re-engaging and I start talking with people about what's going on with them, I start getting better. And I think it's because when I try to help you, I don't know that I can be helpful. I don't even try to be helpful anymore. I tell most of the people I sponsor that I am a lousy sponsor, and most of them will agree with you. And the reason I say that is because I am not concerned with helping you. It's not my goal at all. My goal is to make an honest, sincere effort to be helpful to you. What you get out of it is your business. That's between you and God. That's not my business at all. If I make a sincere effort to be helpful and I let you in, I get better. And that's what I want. I want to get better. So every time somebody comes to sit with me or calls me on the phone and they're struggling in their sobriety, and there are many people in this room will tell you that I've said this to them over and over and over again, how many people are you sponsoring? How many meetings are you going to? How much are you making an effort to get your ass out of the house, quit worrying about all of the things that interfere with your involvement in AA and dig into AA? How much of that are you doing? And without exception, all of the people that re-engage get better. And then later they get worse again. And I ask them the same question. How many people are you sponsoring? There's a couple of guys laughing right here. We've had these conversations in the very recent past. We've had these conversations. How many people are you working with? Well, nobody's asked me to sponsor them. Well, if this is really about me getting better and making the effort to help me get better, why would I sit around waiting for you to ask me to help you? In doing that, I'm putting my welfare in your hands, and you guys are not that reliable, if you want to know the truth. If Bill and Bob, when they first got together, Bill and Bob kind of stumbled into, what they thought they were onto something here. And Bob said to Bill was 5.5 months sober. Bob was probably 3 weeks sober, 2 weeks sober. He said, Bill, if this thing is really going to work, don't you think you and I should get busy and find somebody to work with? And Bill said, well, yeah, Bob, that sounds like a great idea. So Bob calls the hospital where he was barely still attending. And he said to the nurse, he said, hey, nurse, this is Dr. Bob. You got any drunks down there that we could come talk to? I've met a man who's found a cure for alcoholism. And she said, well, have you tried it? And I can just hear Bob saying, yes, you smart ass, I have. She said, yeah, we got a guy who's black in the eyes of several nurses, and we got him strapped down. Well, give him this medication, this medication, this medication to detox him, and we'll be down to talk with him. Is he married? Yeah, he's married. Well, do you have his wife's phone number? Yes. So they called her, and they got all the information they could on him. And they asked her, could you afford a private room? She said, not really. But if it'll help him stay sober, we'll find a way to do it. So he called the nurse back and said, put him in a private room and we'll be up in a couple of days to see him. And they're very excited. I can just see him in the kitchen thinking, we got a guy. And they went down to see him. And they introduced themselves as men. They started talking with him. And they just told him their story and what they had discovered. And if you want, if you're interested in our help, we're here to help you. We'll help you if you want. Now, if you don't, we'll leave you alone. We're not going to force ourselves, but we'll help you if you want it. So the guy said, well, I'm not really sure. And as they were leaving, he said, hey, fellas, are you going to come back tomorrow? And they said, yeah. And they came back tomorrow, and they met with him again, and they came back the next day. And after a few days, his wife was there, and they talked some more. And as they were getting ready to leave, he says to his wife, he said, hey, give me my clothes. We're getting out of here. And that man walked out of that hospital. He never drank again. Well, did Bob and Bill make that man sober? No, here was a man that had reached the same level of surrender, that he was not willing to drink anymore, no matter what. Whether those boys were there or not, he wasn't willing to drink anymore. These boys just happened to show up at the right time and be willing to help him. And because of that, this man went on to live a happy life. But he got out of what he got out of it, not because of them. They made themselves better in making the effort to help him. And that's what I have learned to do in my last 15 years of sobriety. When I see a new man, there's a man sitting in a room tonight that came to my office not long ago, and I said, do you have a sponsor? And he said, yeah, but it's not working out good. I said, good, let me be your sponsor because I could use the work. And besides, it might be good for you too. And he said, I don't know. I don't know if I really want you to be my sponsor because, you got a lot of ego. He said this right to me. He said, you got a lot of ego and you got all these guys giving you attention all the time, and I don't know. I said, well, whatever. You don't have to if you don't want to, but if you want some help, I'll be glad to help you. Do I think I'm able to help that man? No, I don't know, maybe. He might get something out of what I share with him, but that's not the whole point. The point is, I want to continue to grow spiritually myself, and I know the only way that's going to happen for me is if I make an honest effort to try to be helpful to others. Doesn't matter specifically who, just be helpful to others. And in doing that, I let you in. And when I let you in, I'm able to experience God in my life. If I don't make that effort, shame on me. I'm the only one to blame for the position I find myself in. So over the years, I've gotten very active in AA and gotten very healthy emotionally. Thank you, Dave. Dave just gave me the 2-minute sign. So I'm going to face this side of the room from now on. And I don't even remember what I was talking about. Oh, I make the effort to put myself out there for others, and I get better. And then after a while, I get busy, and I come up with the same crap that everybody else does. Well, work and family and, my horses, and I have 2 new pigs. I'm busy. I got things going on. My granddaughter needs me. She's in trouble at school. So there's always some excuse. But the truth is, all of those things going on in my life, if in spite of all of that stuff that's going on, if I will just go to a meeting and I will watch for a new person to raise their hand and make sure they don't leave that meeting without me talking to them and me not just saying, here's my number, if you need somebody, call me. I don't know where all that came from too. I don't know where it came from that I will not sponsor you unless you call me. Because Bill and Bob, if you read the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, Bill and Bob would go see their new man every day for up to 60, 90 days if they wanted to see him. And the wives would go see the Al-Anons, and they would take turns making calls on them. Our job in Alcoholics Anonymous was to be helpful to these people, to make an effort. There are some people in this room that would not call me. I'd ask them to call me every day, and they wouldn't call. So a few days go by, and then I'd call them. I always try with the new man, is to get their phone number, because I know they're probably not going to call. So if I don't hear from them in a couple of days, I call them and say, hey, Brent, how you doing? I don't sponsor Brent, but this is what I'd say to Brent if he was new. I'd say, hey, Brent, how you doing? Brent would say the same thing they always say. Hey, I'm sorry, I know I was supposed to call, but I should. And I said, don't worry about it. You don't know me anything. I just checking on you, see how you're doing. So tell me what's going on. And if I don't hear from him in a couple of days, I call him again. If I don't hear from him in a couple of days, I call him again. There's somebody in this room that I called like that for 2.5 years. And you know, for the last 3 years, he's called me every week without fail. Think about that for a second. If I had demanded that man call me every day, I would have missed the opportunity to be his sponsor. He may not have missed anything. He might have went and found a much better sponsor and gotten better much quicker. I don't know. But I would have missed the opportunity to be his sponsor. Because I reached out to him, I didn't miss that opportunity, and I just kept being kind to him, and I kept being kind to him, and finally one day he trusted me enough that he wanted to talk to me, and he started calling me, and he started talking to me about his emotional instability and what's going on in his life, and I was able to participate in his life. And imagine how that would help me in my spiritual growth, having that man in my life. Now, I may not keep him in my life, I don't know, but I'm going to make the effort to. Me learning to live in love with others unconditionally has been the secret to my spiritual growth. And I hope if you're new, or if you're got some time and you're struggling finding that peace, that you think about some of the things I've said about what you've helped me learn here. Is our job is to reach out to others and try to be kind and try to be helpful as much as we can and try to be there for them as much as they need us to. You've been going to Al-Anon a lot of years. How long does it take somebody new to start trusting you? Well, hell, you don't know, and I don't know either, do we? Everybody's different. We don't know how long it'll take you to trust me because we don't know what you're struggling with. So I'm going to make an effort to be there until you do. And I want to earn that trust. And in doing that, can you just imagine how good that makes me feel about me? Thank you.